Said I'm recording.
There you go.
We're gonna get a bunch of assets for everybody on this call today that I will send out on Friday. It's good, just a follow-up pack. It'll include your slide deck and the questions. And let's see what we can drum up here today. Let's work hard here for the next hour. I see a lot of great people on here: John and Jonathan, Kenneth and Kevin, a bunch of Kevins, yeah. Michael, really interested, and Jeffrey Tan. Love to see where you sit with Luxul currently, and if there's any examples, if there's any things you'd like Jared to help us out with, please bring that into the conversation. Other than that, Jared's going to lead us down the promised land path on our Wednesday webinar series. Okay, so I am Gary from Volutone today in Salt Lake, and I, of course, Snap One. We represent AllNet and MRI and Custom Plus. This is a national conversation. So, Jared, I'm making you famous all across the country. Everybody, I know, press and record. We're ready to go. Let's get to work. Jared Edwards, one of my favorite people from Luxul. Here we go. There you go, guys.
All right, I'm going to start off here by sharing my screen, and I appreciate you, Gary, and this opportunity with Snap One and being able to take some time, and certainly appreciate all of you guys as well for being able to be here and make some time today. So let's start off with this. Let's see if this works. Did that work? It looks like it did. How about that? Okay, so we're going to focus on mesh today a little bit, and I'm going to do my best to try and keep up on the questions, but Gary, of course, is also kind of my counterpart in that regard, and so we'll kind of work together. Gary, if there's something that comes in that you see that is relevant for what we're talking about right at the moment, then please stop me and interrupt me, and I will definitely not be offended at that. Yep. And we can certainly go over the question at that time, or we can save them to the end, whatever works best. So
you got it.
But they kind of asked me to talk about mesh a little bit, and mesh is still relatively new for us. So I'm sure there's some of you that have used it, some of you that haven't. And so we'll go over some new things about mesh for those that have had it or have used it, excuse me. And then for those that haven't, maybe all of this will be new. We'll find out as we go. But that's really kind of what we're going to talk about and why we did it and where mesh can be used and that type of thing. So here's our agenda today, because there are some new things about the mesh product, ours specifically since we launched it, that we're excited to share with you today. So we're going to briefly, and I mean very briefly, go over what is a mesh network, because it's funny, as much as we talk about mesh, there are still very large misconceptions out there about what mesh actually is as a technology. And part of that is because there's been several companies that have advertised mesh for a couple of years now, and there's those catchphrases out there like "never think about your Wi-Fi again," and "it's the best product to ever hit Wi-Fi since sliced bread." And some of that can be true in certain circumstances, but for the most part, for the custom install world that we all live in, that might not be the exact case. So we'll go over some of those things, and we'll talk about, in conjunction with that, when to use mesh and when to use standard APs. And then we'll talk about some of the new uses that we have for our mesh product that can be the ways that it can be used besides just a regular mesh system. And then we'll go over some differentiators and some things that kind of are unique about our mesh product versus a lot of the others in the market. And then a couple of really cool key announcements that are not only just unique to mesh, but a couple of other things as well. So we'll get to all of that. So that's kind of our basic agenda today. If you have questions about anything else that is not mesh related, please feel free to let us know. And like I said, at the end, I'll be happy to stay on for as long as we need to and make sure all those questions get answered. So, all right, so let's talk about real quickly, for those of you that may or may not be aware, what is a mesh network and how do they work? And why is this word mesh become so ubiquitous and so synonymous in the networking world? Well, really, a mesh network is a pretty simple concept. And, the connotation is that mesh is this new technology that just came about a couple of years ago that really kind of changed the face of Wi-Fi. And in reality, none of that is true. Mesh technology as a concept and as a working product has actually been around for more than 20 years. There's been a couple of companies that have kind of dabbled in it a little bit, But there's a few things that happened that really kind of brought it more mainstream, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But really, in its simplistic definition, mesh is just a system of APs, or in the mesh world, they call them nodes, that are able to connect to each other wirelessly. And one of the things that came along recently that kind of brought it into the forefront or the mainstream is a new algorithm that was created. And this algorithm allows nodes to be able to organize or heal themselves in a particular manner. So for example, I've got my main node here that's connected with Ethernet to my network or to my modem or my internet connection. Then I've got the other three over here, as you can see in the graphic, that are just kind of plugged in different places, across the home or the business. And of course, they all can connect up wirelessly. Well, let's say that they decide that their pathway is going to be from the one on the very far left here, all the way to this one, and then to this one, and then back to the one that's connected to the modem or to the internet and to the network. And all is well in the world until that one in the very top right up here, let's say something happens and it gets unplugged from power. Well, one of the great things about mesh is that it has the ability to reorganize, or what they call self-heal, and basically says, hey, I can see that this one is no longer part of the network. So rather than trying to just, hang this guy out to dry and not let him do anything, I'm going to reorganize myself and say, now my pathway is going to go straight from here over to this one and then over to this one. And it does that, of course, all automatically in the background. You don't have to worry about anything or do anything or configure anything. So it's really kind of nice. The other thing that came about that kind of brought mesh more into the mainstream is the addition of a third and dedicated radio that's 5 gigahertz typically, that connects all these nodes together. And so you combine that third radio with this new algorithm that was written, and you've got the makings of a new product category and a whole lot of advertising that went behind it. And that's really what mesh is. It's just the ability for different devices to connect to each other in a wireless manner and kind of organize themselves and heal themselves. Okay. And that brings up the question is, well, if this is so cool, which it kind of is, why would I use APs over mesh? Well, here's the thing. When you're going to use mesh as a wireless product where all the nodes are wireless to wireless to wireless, the unfortunate thing is you're now subject to all of the unpredictable things that come along with wireless. And you're now taking the backbone of your network and relying now on things like signal strength and data flow and all those things that we all deal with wireless every single day. And now even the backbone of our network is subject to all of those things. So like I said, mesh is not a replacement for anything in the Luxul line. It's just an addition to the line. And we want to make that very clear. And we've been, I think, quite clear about that, is this is not a replacement for APs. It can be used in lots of different circumstances to great benefit and work really, really well. But there's a couple of things that you might want to consider when you're designing the install that you've got coming up. Some of the ways that mesh can be used really well is when you pull an Ethernet wire to a location is not a possibility. So let's say you're retrofitting and maybe it's an older home, maybe it's got lath and plaster walls or everything's finished, and you just simply cannot get a wire to where you'd need to get a wire. And that's a great use case for mesh, because now you can still get network there, and as long as those can connect up on that backhaul radio, you can create network and create really good coverage out of a network. And so that's one great option for it. Maybe another one is when a simple network is needed. Maybe you've got some empty nesters and it's a small to medium-sized home, and they're really not doing anything real heavy with their network. They just need some connectivity and maybe need some better signal strength in multiple places around the home. And that one modem router combo down in the basement corner where the service comes in just isn't providing coverage everywhere you need it. And so that's another great use case for it. And so, again, these are general guidelines. There's no hard and fast rules here, of course. You guys certainly have the ability to put in whatever you think is best for each job. But typically speaking, a good general rule of thumb is if it's a smaller to medium home and you're not going to be doing a whole lot on the network, or it's, retrofit, like I mentioned, that's maybe a great place for mesh to be used. On the other hand, APs are, of course, a bit of a different animal. And those are still, we still recommend that's where you're going to want to use for larger homes, larger networks. Certainly, if you're going to be doing things like audio or video over IP, or some sort of control system, or some sort of IP camera system, anything where they're going to be, relying on the network with all of the connected devices having to have connectivity and be able to work and talk to each other in order for the home to function. And so our general, what we've kind of thrown out there as a rule of thumb is, if you're going to be doing an automation system or a camera system or something where there's multiple APs, it's a larger home, and network connectivity is going to be crucial to the home running and operating, then that's a time when you might want to look at going with standard APs. Typically, certainly if you're new construction and you're going to be pre-wiring the job and you have the ability to pull wires wherever you need them, then we always recommend pull more than you think you're going to need to more locations, and then you have options to place APs wherever you need to or want to for that job. So again, not necessarily that those are hard and fast rules, like I said, but as general rules, that's kind of the approach that you want to take for mesh versus APs. Any questions on that so far, Gary? Anything we need to go over?
We're clear at questions right now, but I'm standing with Nick here, and you had a quick question. Let's Nick, they can hear you.
Okay. Sorry, I chimed in a little bit late. I don't know if you covered this already, but do all of them have to be, obviously the first one's hardline, and do you have the option to hardline any others? Or are they all supposed to be set up as mesh?
Yes, that's a great question, and I hadn't gotten to it yet. So yes, okay. Every mesh node has the ability to be either wired or wireless. So, okay. If you've got, and you can mix and match in the same network. So let's say you had a 4-node system, and the first one, of course, is hardwired, and that's the router. And two of them are in locations where you can't get wires to, but the fourth one you could. I highly recommend plugging in every one of them that you can. But yes, Perfect. They can be either or.
Cool. That's all I got. Appreciate it.
You bet. Okay, cool. All right, so some of the uses, and this is where it kind of gets into fun stuff, because this is more than just using it as a mesh product. And some of you may have used these in these type of circumstances, but we've actually been pleasantly surprised that dealers have been so creative and used these in different ways. So obviously, there's a bunch of different ways you can use it. And the first one is a typical standard mesh where, one of them's connected and it's the router it's connected to the modem or the modem router combo usually. And then they're wireless to wireless to wireless. Another way, like Nick just mentioned, is a hardwired or a mixed mesh system. So you can mix and match, like we just talked about, in the same network and have some of them be wired and some of them be wireless or whatever you need to do. The third option is some that maybe people haven't quite thought of. And if you're in a smaller home where you think that, maybe this is going to be fairly centrally located and it's going to be able to cover pretty much everything I think I need to cover with it from a Wi-Fi standpoint, you can use it as just a standalone wireless router. It does not have to be combined with other mesh nodes. So it can be used as just a standalone piece. And then, of course, if something comes along later and you do need to have more nodes added to it, then you certainly can add to that network at any time. But it can be used as a standalone wireless router. And then the fourth way that it can be used, believe it or not, is as a standalone wired router. And this one is one that's actually kind of cool because for the price point of what a mesh node is, it is a full gigabit WAN to LAN throughput router. And I use it at my house actually as a wired router, and I use it as a mesh as well, of course. But it actually is a really, really good wired router, and you'll see why here in a few minutes, is because we've done a few things to actually make it be pretty much full-featured router. So you can use it as a standalone wired router, connect the second Ethernet jack on there out to a switch, and plug everything else in your network that's hardwired into that switch, just as you would in any other network. The other way we've seen it used is, if somebody needs a really fast router because they've got a high service provider rate or speed coming from their service provider, then they use this as a hardwired router. And we've even seen people put APs in a controller behind this for the Wi-Fi. So lots of different ways that you can use it. Wanted to throw those out there as different options for you, because it doesn't just have to be simple as a standard mesh product. There's lots of different uses for it. Okay. I do see a couple of questions here. Let's see if we can tap in.
I'll throw them at you. Pascal Smith, thank you. Would using a different router and switches while the mesh network in an AP mode be beneficial? Also, we've had issues with using standard APs with things like AirPlay and other software that requires a constant connection.
Yeah. So let's see here. The first part of your question is using different router switches while the mesh network's in AP mode. So you're talking about just using it as an AP, I'm guessing. You can do that, certainly. One thing that is a little unique about ours is the first node in the system will always be designated as the router. So you're not going to want to use, you're not going to need to use another router in the system and then just use these as APs. It'll always be the router, which keeps the router as part of the mesh system so that you can have more continuity when you're doing things like AirPlay, like you mentioned. We've actually had, to be totally upfront and honest, we've had pretty good success with things like AirPlay when you're moving around. There have been some circumstances, of course, where there will be drop-offs, and part of that, frankly, is just because of the way AirPlay is built. There's literally zero buffer in AirPlay, so kind of like a VoIP call. If it receives any interruption whatsoever, it doesn't like that at all. So, there are going to be some circumstances where it's not going to be perfect, but for the most part, it does actually work quite well for that. So, okay.
Got it. Also, Scott, can you use the farthest AP Connect mesh to get to a dedicated caseta or a detached caseta? Sorry.
Yes, if I understand what you're saying, you want to know, can you go wireless through the mesh and then go out of the mesh wired to a caseta device? Am I understanding that correctly?
Scott,
the answer is yes, you can do that. Okay. Or you can attach the caseta to the wireless network that's there. No, caseta doesn't attach wireless, does it? I don't think it does. So yes, you can go out of any of the nodes and use them as like a small switch and plug in some Ethernet devices out of any of the nodes that are on the network.
Scott followed up with, can you plug network device into the farthest mesh node to plug a camera in?
Yes, you can.
Okay, yep. Good. Thanks, Scott, for that question. Dane Peterson, hey, Dane. Does Luxul Mesh Network support roaming and non-interrupted Wi-Fi calls?
We do support roaming. It's fast roaming, and I can get into that in a minute. But okay. But yes, there is a fast roaming built into it. It's not the same roaming as what our active roaming in our wireless controller is, but it is fast roaming, and I can go over that in more detail if you need.
Let's keep rolling forward for a bit, Jared. There are more questions. We will get to every one of them. I just don't want to preface a question before you kind of get to it. Why don't we roll for another 10 minutes and then we'll take another pause.
Sounds good.
Bud. Yep.
Okay, cool. So let me go back to this here. So some best practices and some tips with mesh then. Like we've kind of talked about, it's a great option when a simple or smaller network is needed. We do have the ability to go higher than this, but we've kind of heard from the field in our own testing, 6 to 8 nodes is starting to get to be a pretty big mesh system. So if you're going to be looking at a project that's going to need 6 or 7 or 8 nodes, I would highly recommend you look at standard APs instead. It's just going to be a better overall experience. These are not as high powered as our APs. So for those of you that are used to our higher powered APs, they don't create quite the same amount of coverage. They are higher powered than most every other mesh system that's out on the market, but they're not as high as the standard APs are. So plan accordingly for that. And like I mentioned, the mesh as a router is actually an extremely capable router. The last thing to note, because we will talk about firmware update here in just a moment, is you want to be a little bit patient with firmware updates. The way firmware updates typically work on a mesh is you update the router node first, and then depending upon how many nodes you have that are remote nodes in the network and how far away they are and what their signal strength is, and all of those things factor in if they're all wireless. It does sometimes take, 7, 8, 9, 10 minutes for a firmware update to go through the entire system, again, depending upon how many nodes you've got. So be patient with that if you do update the firmware on them. All right, so initial configuration. For those of you that have not used the mesh before, you'll note that this is very similar to other mesh systems where it is an app-based setup. And we use our Easy Setup app, which is the same one we've had for a number of years now that you've had the ability to use to set up wireless routers. Well, with the mesh system, it's the same app, but there is no other option for setting up. You have to use the app for initial setup because wireless is the only way to connect and get into it. So you use the Easy Setup app. It's available, of course, for both iOS and Android. And I am not exaggerating when I say a multi-node setup is a 2 to 3 minute ordeal. It really is very quick and very, very simple. If you want to add a node to an existing system, you do not have to reset the entire mesh network. You can use the app again and just add that node to the existing system. So those are the two uses for the app. There are walkthroughs of this. We've got videos that show how to do this, that walk you through the whole setup and everything. And so if you need more information on that, it certainly is available. But the point I want to try and drive home here is that this is really, really simple. I've got a 3-node system in my home right now. I'm actually broadcasting on that currently. And it literally takes me about 3 minutes to set them up. And the thing that takes the longest is walking from one node to the next to scan the barcode on the back of it. So it really is very, very quick and easy. Couple things that you can do with the initial setup or the additional configuration afterwards, and this is where things become very unique, is because unlike most other mesh systems where everything is on the app, any sort of configuration options after the initial setup are done in a regular web GUI, just like you'd see with any of our regular routers. And this allows us to make it much more customizable and give you many more options for running a full-featured network from a mesh system. So just about anything that our full-featured routers do, the mesh will also do. There's basically two things that it won't do. One is QoS and the other is multiple VLANs. But other than that, it's fully capable of just about everything else that our other routers are. Well, I guess there's a third thing. It won't do multi-WAN. So those three things are the only things that it won't do. So static leasing, port forwarding, guest networks, all these things that you could think of or that you'd want to do with a router, you certainly can. If you need to change the IP address subnet, it is not just a drop-down list where you have 2 or 3 different options and that's all you're stuck with. You can manually enter in whatever subnet scheme you want and go from there, again, just like you would with a regular router. And this was done on purpose to try and make it much more custom installer friendly. Again, this is a product that is built specifically for all of you. This is not a mass market product from a mass market company that, oh yeah, by the way, guys, all the you custom installers, you bet, sure, we'll sell it to you as well. This was something that was meant specifically and designed specifically for you. So there's things like this that we've built in on purpose to try and make it, like I said, more custom installer friendly. Okay. So some of those features include multiple SSIDs, and one big feature about those SSIDs is they can be named different. Now you'll notice that second bullet point there says when they are different, fast roaming band steering do get turned off. And so as part of the initial setup, or you can do it either in initial setup or afterwards, either way works just fine. But if you do it in the app during initial setup and you slide that SSID button to off, there will be that little orange text that shows up and says, hey, just so that you know, When you turn this off so that you can name the SSIDs separately, fast roaming and band steering are going to get turned off. Now, there's a bit of a story behind this. This is the main reason why other brands do not allow you to separate the SSIDs, is because the way the mesh chipset is built, if you name them different, those two features get turned off. So for the person that asked the question earlier about roaming, you'd want to make sure that your SSIDs are named the same. Well, if that's the case, and this is going to get turned off when you separate them, why would we allow you to do it when pretty much nobody else does? Well, the main reason, again, is because we wanted them to be custom installer friendly. There are certainly many circumstances where you have a particular device, whether it's just a simplistic IoT device, maybe it's something like a washer and dryer or a fridge or some, stupid light switch somewhere from a third-party company or something. Whatever the case it is, a lot of those times, of course, they only have very inexpensive 2.4 Wi-Fi cards in them. And as I'm sure you well know, I'm not telling you anything new, a lot of times they either have problems getting connected to the network in the first place or staying connected if the SSIDs are named the same for both bands. And so again, in order to try and alleviate and avoid that problem, we allow you to separate them out with the knowledge that, things aren't potentially going to roam quite as quick or band steer quite as quick because you have enabled that feature of being able to turn them or make them separate. So just be aware of that going forward. Some pros and cons, and you can certainly determine which is going to be best for that particular installation. Okay, a couple of other features. Multiple SSIDs are capable so that you can create a separate SSID if you want to for just another thing. And this is maybe a way to get around separating them out. You can have your main SSID be combined of 2.4 and 5 if that's appropriate for that job, and then create another 2.4 only SSID for those IoT type devices. So there's, kind of think of it this way, there's multiple ways to skin the cat. And in this case, there's multiple ways to create customization so that you can get all the devices attached and secure and stay attached and maintain that attachment to the network, whichever way works best for you. Like I mentioned earlier, there's a full range of subnets. You can just manually type in what you want them to be. It's not just a preset drop-down list. Static leases and port forwardings. It is a VLAN-less guest network, so you can just literally click the button, yes, I want a guest network, and it will automatically generate that for you within the mesh. It is a separate subnet, so there is security and separation there. What we mean by VLAN-less is you don't have to have managed switches or set up any sort of VLAN to create that separation. It does it for you all within the mesh nodes. So there is separation there. It's just automatically taken care of for you. You don't have to configure anything different or have any other equipment to do it. Okay. Any questions on that so far? And see more and more coming in, so I want to make sure we're not getting too far behind on them.
We've got a couple specifics, some roaming questions here, Jared. You might want to put some eyes on, and there's some examples. Like Bradley's got an example that I want you to address, maybe toward the end. But here's Dane's question. Does mesh networking from Luxul support VLANs or isolated guest accounts?
Like I mentioned, it does from a guest network standpoint. So it will allow you to create a guest network that does have a separate subnet. So it creates its own internal VLAN. But as far as VLANs going out to a switch or to other devices, no, it does not have VLAN capabilities. There's no trunking and things like that in the mesh system.
Chris asked, does mesh have ProWatch support yet?
Yes, and you're jumping ahead of me, Chris.
Yeah, see, so yeah,
that's one of the announcements we're going to make today.
Let's continue to, there you go. Let's continue to roll forward, Jared. There's about 8 or 9 questions. Keep them coming, guys. We'll go over everything. I want Jared to have eyes on it, so he might be relating to something we've already covered. So there you go, buddy.
Okay, so since you stole my thunder there, Chris, yes, ProWatch is now available on Mesh. Almost like you saw this slide coming or something. It's crazy how that works. It was launched a couple of weeks ago, August 2nd to be exact. It is just a firmware update. So there's nothing required on your part other than updating the mesh system. Here's how the firmware updates work. If it's a brand new mesh system or a new install or any sort of mesh that is in a factory default state. As part of the initial setup with the app will automatically go out and pull the new update and do that as its last step of the setup process. So you'll automatically get the latest firmware doing it that way. If it is an existing system, then the easiest way to do it is to actually go to legrandav.com, and you can go to the Luxul section. And if you see here, you can scroll, and if you just highlight and run your mouse over Luxul, this new window will open up, and you can click right on firmware updates right there. And that will take you directly to the firmware update page that has every firmware for every product of ours. And it's kind of like the old school way of doing it. You just download the firmware, and then when you go back to that job, you can log into the mesh router like you would any other router of ours, and go to administration and firmware update, and select that file, and it'll go. And again, that's where you want to have a little bit of patience, because again, the process is it will go through the router first, and then it will go out to all of the nodes once the router is back up. So the real easy way to kind of keep an eye on this is the LEDs on every single mesh node will indicate where they are in the process. And once they are all back to white, every one of them is done. So they will go in kind of succession. They kind of go one at a time. So once they're back to a white LED, you're good to go. So some of the enhancements on this mesh firmware, it's not just ProWatch, even though that is the big announcement and that is the big addition. It does resolve some things that we're just trying to clean up things here a little bit. So it does resolve some random connection drops between nodes, makes things a little more efficient there. It does also improve the configuration changes between nodes. So once you have a system set up, if you need to change the SSIDs, or if you need to change the subnet, or basically any change, there's a much more efficient and robust method of doing that on the back end of things. And so the pushing the config file of whatever you've just changed to all of the nodes is much improved. And then of course, there's a bunch of various UI improvements and things like that. So, but the big one, like I mentioned, is certainly ProWatch. So for those of you that aren't familiar with this, this is the full ProWatch Plus version is what is built into Mesh. So this is the version that is kind of like, the full version of Domot's, where it goes out and it finds every device on the network. It's not just the Mesh products. So it doesn't matter what brand it is, it will find it and give you a list of all those things. And then anything that has a web UI, you are able to log into remotely. So this is, as far as we know, the only mesh system that has a full-featured remote management piece of software in it. I know Eero has theirs that will get you remotely into the Eero branded devices or the Eero mesh system. This is not just get you into the Luxul mesh system. This is every device on the network. So it's the same ProWatch that's built into our full-featured routers, or our larger routers. So really, really cool. For those that have used remote management, you definitely know the benefits. For those that haven't, I would highly encourage you to take a look at ProWatch. Like I said, this is just a couple of screenshots for it. You can see on the left-hand side there that it is kind of tile-based, and you can look at your devices. You can set alerts for devices. All of that is customizable. If you're like me, I don't want to know the 438 times a day my kid's iPhone goes on and off the network. But if my automation controller or my modem or my router or something critical to the network or the house running goes offline, that I probably do want to know about. And certainly you can do all those things. You can firmware update through it. Currently, that is pretty much only for Luxul products. But we do, of course, in the future have plans to integrate third-party products into this as well. There's a bunch of different users, site permissions, roles permissions. You can set it up for yourself as a dealer. You can enable different technicians of yours to either have access or not have access. You can enable your end user to have access or not have access based upon what you want them to do or don't do. So lots of different options there as well. Just to kind of give you an idea here, the screenshot in the middle is the device list, and you can see that it literally goes out and finds every single device on the network, regardless of brand. And then whether it's a Luxul branded piece or or a network NVR, camera NVR, or a audio video receiver, or a smart TV, or anything like that. Literally anything that has a web user interface, you can then log into it via ProWatch remotely, and it's as if you're there on site. This, of course, is all done through the cloud. It is a very secure cloud. It's a 256-bit encryption. You don't have to port forward. You don't have to open up VPNs, anything like that. So very, very secure in the way that it works. And then on the right-hand side, that screenshot there is just simply what one of our integrated products look like. This happens to be a switch, where even though the switch natively isn't running ProWatch, it looks and acts like it is in the interface, because it pulls up everything about the switch. You can click on where it says under port 1 there, where it says 2 devices. You can click on that and it will tell you what those 2 devices are. Certainly you have the ability to power cycle things, and the same basic interface is available with PDUs as well. So you can now power cycle PoE ports individually, power outlet ports from a PDU individually, things like that that you're used to with remote management software. So very, very cool stuff. Any questions on that?
Sorry, buddy, got hung up really quick. Derek, yes, of course, I'm recording this session and we're gonna get back to you guys. Let's keep rolling forward. And I think what we're gonna do, since we don't have overwhelming questions, but we definitely got a few that we're gonna address. Jared, why don't we roll forward, and then we're gonna start from newest and we're gonna work our way back.
Okay.
And when we're done for the Q&A session. Thank you, buddy.
So here is the other big announcement that we're excited about to be able to announce today. As you know, there's been a couple of purchasing options. You can buy the nodes individually, or you can buy them as a kit. Now, the nodes are all the same physical product. They are designated and set up differently during initial setup using the app. So all of them are capable of being a router. It's just whichever one you designate during setup. So when the cool thing about this, and the thing that we're excited to announce, is there's actually been a price reduction on these very recently. Actually happened to be the same day as the new firmware with ProWatch in it was released. It's about a 25% price decrease. So a retail of $229 for the individual node, and you can kind of figure out your margin from there. But please check with your Snap local branch for exact pricing there. Or you can buy it as a kit, which is 2 nodes in the kit. And then, of course, you can buy, if you need 4 nodes, you can buy 2 kits. Or if you need 3 nodes, you can buy a kit and an individual, whatever combination you need. These also, of course, have the same price reduction. So now we're talking about $450 retail for the 2 node kit. And again, you can get with your local Snap branch there for exact pricing on that. But you guys probably can figure out about what that's going to be. And that's another point about our mesh system, is that it does have margin for you as the dealer. Again, with us not being a mass market product, yeah, it's a little bit more expensive than maybe somebody else that's a mesh product on the shelf, but there's margin built in there for you, so you're not just basically selling it for the same price as the big box store or the online retailer. So that's kind of nice. So we're excited about that. Excited to be able to have a price reduction in a world of prices going up on just about everything else. The other thing that's neat about mesh is this, for whatever reason, is one of the products that we do not have any inventory issues with. So we have plenty of them in stock. The Snap local branches have plenty of them in stock. If they run out on the shelf, they can get more. So excited to announce that stock on these is good to go. So please use them as you need. So a couple of advantages here with Luxul in general. I don't know if any of you have ever used our customer assurance program, which is essentially our design program. Mesh is included in that, and you can say, I'd like to see if I can use mesh here, or I'd want to see if I want to use APs here. And certainly our design team will take a look at what you're trying to accomplish and then make recommendations from there and say, yeah, maybe APs would be better, or actually mesh is a great solution for this. So if you have not used this, it is a free service that we offer, where you basically can send in your plans, answer some questions about what it is you're trying to accomplish on the network, and then you'll get a design from us. And the guarantee or the assurance that comes along with it is that if for whatever reason it doesn't work the way that it is designed or intended, if we need to send a product out to you to make it right, we will do that on our dime. So kind of a nice little second set of eyes looking at it, or a design guy looking at it, that's pretty much what they do all day long. This is just an example of some of the pages of what it looks like. It is a very professionally created document that you could actually turn around and hand to your end customer if you want to. Certainly don't have to, that's your choice, but it is available if you want to. And we can make customizations with it, like if you want retail pricing on there, or if you don't, or however you want it to be done, depending upon what you're going to do with your document. And we've had people use this program for, hey, I have no idea what I'm doing. I want somebody and need somebody to design the network for me, all the way to the other end of the spectrum of, hey, I'm pretty darn good at this, but I just want a second set of eyes to take a look at it to make sure I haven't missed anything. We're fine with all of that. So please feel free to use this and take advantage of the fact that it's a free design service for you out in the field there. Okay. Another thing that's big with us, of course, or else we wouldn't be here today, is training. And, for those of you that have used Luxul products for a long time, we've gone through some transitions with our website over the course of this last year. And so Luxul.com is actually now legrandav.com. It'll redirect you. And so there is no specific dealer portal that there was on Luxul.com, but we have not lost any of the training materials. They are still there. If you, again, go to the Luxul section within the Legrand AV, and you just hover over that, and then you can go right here to Luxul training, and it will take you directly to our online university. You do need to have a login for the university, but everything that was there previously in the dealer portal is still in the university. And of course, there's even more because we've been adding to it over the course of the last year and a half or so. So lots of good content there. We also still have our YouTube channel that you can check out for how-to videos and things like that. But all of it is available from the dealer, or excuse me, not the dealer portal. I'm still used to saying that, can you tell? From the Luxul University. So there's also, this is the same university, by the way, that has all of the Legrand brands in it. So if there's something else that you're interested in, if you need to know how to do a Sanus mount or a Mid-Atlantic rack, or any other product, Nuvo something or other, all of that stuff is all available on that same university, but segmented out into different brands. And we have our own as well as part of that. So, okay. Obviously a 3-year warranty for you. Those of you that don't know, this does include the mesh product as well. So a 3-year warranty on all products, and lifetime tech support to you as the dealer. So just some nice things there to try and help back you up as the dealer, so you don't have to feel like you're going it alone out there in the field. And then lastly, I do want to mention this. If you haven't taken advantage of it, we are still running our personal use program, which is a great program for you guys to be able to get product into your home or your business, or to just check things out, things like that. We are still doing that. There are some limitations, of course, given the limitations on some of the products with inventory challenges. But for the most part, certainly if you are interested in mesh, we can get those out to you right away, that type of thing. So if that's something that is interesting to you, all you need to do is send an email to sales@luxul.com, and they'll reply back to you, and you can go from there. Okay. So we've come to the Q&A section. So Gary, if you're ready, let's fire them up.
I just think we should just take the most recent and we'll work our way back. So I'll fire them at you, Jared. Here we go. Okay. Can you connect to the ISP router staying on the same subnet as the ISP router so an app like Sonos will work?
Interestingly, the way it works is, and we've come across this, so a little bit of background. The way some of the other mesh systems work is if you run them in AP only, or what some of them call bridge mode, every one of them has a different subnet. Every one of the nodes has a different subnet. Ours do not work that way. So what will happen is if you use it with a modem router combo, and it's on the same subnet. So ours by default is 192.168.0. If the modem router combo is on that same subnet, ours will automatically detect it and move off of that subnet to resolve that conflict. but then every one of the nodes will be on the same subnet that the mesh node moved, the mesh router node moved to. So Sonos still does work throughout a mesh system without any interruptions or problems. We've tested this extensively. We've worked with Sonos on it, as a matter of fact, and it does work quite well because all of the nodes are on the same subnet. Great question.
Thank you very much. Phil has a couple of questions. Hey, Phil, what's going on? Can I use Luxul Mesh with URC Lite remotes?
Lite remotes, as in like LITE or LIGHT?
No, LITE, their new line.
Oh, you should be able to. Are they just, as long as they're just regular Wi-Fi remotes? I know they're, what is the MRX, their MRX line, I believe, the 1080s and things like that. All those Wi-Fi remotes work just fine. So
Yeah,
as
I've heard
long
of no
as
issues
they're
as
just
well.
a standard Wi-Fi protocol, they should be fine.
Yeah, Phil, and he also asked me, Gary, how do I sign up? I'm not sure if you're referring to the Luxul portal, or might even have a question about signing up with URC, because we did do a URC training a couple weeks back, and we went over some control issues as well. So Phil,
Yeah.
give me some more detail on that. Well, let's keep rolling forward.
No,
Ray,
I'll mention this too real quick, Gary, is just to put this out there. We have actually tested our mesh system with multiple automation systems. Even though we recommend APs and all of that, we know that sometimes it's going to be unavoidable. Your mesh and automation are going to come together. So we've tested it on Control4, Savant, URC, Elon. About the only one we haven't is Crestron, RTI as well. Yeah, so it does work with pretty much every automation system we've thrown at it. Again, because it works much more like one main network instead of individual nodes on different subnets.
Philip was adding in here, URC recommended static IPs for devices, TVs, etc. Legrand, Luxul Portal, University sign up for that. Okay, Phil. Phil was asking about the Luxul Portal, which you detailed that it was a different address, but it reverts you over there.
Yeah,
Phil,
if you can see right here, if you go to this right here and just click on Luxul Training, it will direct you to here. And for your initial time, you can click the sign up button right there, and that will create your login. And then every other time that you log in, you just go to login instead of sign up, and you're good to go.
Great. Thanks as always, Phil. Ray had asked if it was a US company.
Luxul?
Yeah.
Or Legrand? We are a US company. Legrand is technically a French company. That's where their corporate headquarters are, but they have a division here that's out of Connecticut that is the US division, and we are part of that. So yes, pretty much everything we do does not have much to do with the European division at all, other than them being the main parent corporation.
Chris asks, any issues running ProWatch side by side with Oversea products? How's that testing been going?
We haven't seen any issues. I mean, it's just, the only issue that I could think of is because they're both cloud services, so they're both going to call into their clouds. The only issue that I can think of is we have seen sometimes with Wi-Fi remotes or things that are Wi-Fi enabled that run on battery, where it will drain the battery on those devices much faster because Domo, I've got Domos and ProWatch running on mine. Same thing would be true if you're running ProWatch and Oversea Pro, for example. Those services are going to ping those devices constantly to make sure that they are online or offline. And that's how they get their report back. And so that ping keeps those devices awake a little bit more than they normally would be. And so they do run out of battery power quickly. A URC remote or a Savant remote, I've got a Savant Wi-Fi remote in my case, that normally would last 3-4 days, lasts maybe one. So that is, maybe a potential drawback of running both of them at the same time. But other than that, there's no issue from a software standpoint and a reporting and using both platforms.
Neil asked you to speak to the cost difference between mesh versus traditional AP systems.
It's a little less expensive. It's about the same price as our 810 access point. You start to get into 1510s and 1610s, and then yes, certainly you are going to be at a higher price point, but it's not just because it's an AP, it's because you're buying something that's a much more capable device that has higher speeds and more client connection capabilities and things like that. So it is lower priced to begin with, but it depends on what you're trying to accomplish as an end result.
Sure. Bill asked the status on the Wi-Fi 6 products.
Not currently. Wi-Fi 6 is definitely on our radar. This is a very long discussion that I'm more than happy to have with you offline if you'd like to. But there's a lot of misconceptions and a lot of marketing about Wi-Fi 6 currently. I know there's some other products that are mesh products that are out there that claim Wi-Fi 6, and they do have it, but they don't have the full iteration of Wi-Fi 6. And so it really kind of becomes a question of how effective is it really at this point. So again, much longer discussion. I'm happy to have it with you in a different setting, but we will have Wi-Fi 6 products. We just don't have them today, but they are coming. They are on the roadmap. They may be 6E. They may be Wi-Fi 7. So there's a lot of things that are coming down the pipe. I wouldn't hang your hat 100% on Wi-Fi 6 versus not.
Fine. Let's talk installation really quick. Scott, in a normal drywall residence, how close should the nodes be to each other?
Yeah, they'll cover 1,000 square feet or so typically in a normal wood framing and drywall scenario. I've got with my basement about a 3,200 square foot house, and 2 nodes easily covers it. I have 3 running right now, and it also, with 3 of them, covers my 3rd acre yard. So that kind of gives you an idea that you don't have to really have them very, very close, but you do have to keep in mind that all of the connections between them, if you're doing it wirelessly, are 5 gig. And of course, the advantage of 5 gig is speed, but the disadvantage is distance. So it's a little bit of a balancing act. As part of the app setup, when you add a node to the system, it will do a search and tell you whether the signal strength is good or poor. And if it's poor, then you physically have to move it. But if it's good, then you're good to go. Mm-hmm. So there is an indicator there as part of the setup process.
Scott also asked, can you plug all the nodes into a network, then update the firmware for faster updates or pre-deployment?
Plugging in Ethernet, sure, you can. You'd have to make sure that all of the nodes are designated and set up to be on a wired connection instead of wireless. But yes, you absolutely could do that.
All right, let's see. Do you have remote access to the system and configure this remotely in the future?
Configuration after initial setup, yes. For initial setup, of course, no, because you have to physically be there to scan the barcode on the back and set it up. But once it's set up, with ProWatch, you do have the ability to remotely get in and make changes because you can log into the user interface of the router node just like you can any other device. So yes, after initial setup, you do have remote connection capabilities.
Kind of goes with Kyle's question, which was, does it support auto update for firmware?
Not auto update yet, but you can. We will be implementing that inside ProWatch in the future. Right now, all of the regular products do it, but Mesh does not yet through ProWatch. But we're working on that. So you do have to manually do the firmware update, or at least manually start the process and tell it which file. But you could do that remotely as well.
Mm-hmm. Charlie's question: why can't the standard Luxul routers, 3150s and 5000s, etc., have a guest network anymore, while the mesh network system can have a guest network?
Completely different chipset and different code that's running it. The issue with the guest networks in the 3150s was that it created its own internal guest network, which then if you ever added a switch or additional APs or anything like that, became very, very confusing because it was not using VLANs. And then, of course, if you're going to do APs or manage switches, you do have to use VLANs. So the easier route, and this is a longer story, but the easier route was to just make it so that you always have to use VLANs, which is why that feature was removed out of the wireless router internally.
Okay. William's question: can these be used in combination with the regular AP mesh controller to access areas where we cannot get a wire?
So yes and no. No, you cannot combine mesh and APs in the same wireless network, but you can run a mesh node as a wired router and then use all APs behind it. So unfortunately, that is actually something we tried to do and wanted to make happen. We are limited, unfortunately, by the mesh chipset itself. It will not allow any wireless connection of any type other than a mesh, another mesh connection to it. So you cannot mix and match APs or have a standard AP attached wirelessly to a mesh system, unfortunately, or vice versa. But you can use, like I said, the mesh node as a wired router and then use all APs behind it if you needed to.
Got it. A couple questions from Jeffrey. Thanks for joining us, Jeffrey, today. I talked to you yesterday. Does Luxul have plans for a cloud controller rather than a on-premises controller?
Potentially, but not that's certainly not on the forefront of the roadmap. The problem with a cloud controller is that it's not nearly as fast, because every time you want to have a roaming decision made, it has to rely on the speed and latency and connection of the internet to go up to the cloud and then back down with an answer. And so it's just not nearly as quick as an on-premise device. So it's something that's been thought of, but probably not anytime soon.
And Jeffrey's question also, because he had called me yesterday and I invited him on today. So I think he's in the midst of an install perhaps, but he also asked, do we have a feature to set or to force certain IoT devices to connect to specific AP?
I wish is the honest answer. That is a feature that we've actually been asking for a while now. I know that there's some things that engineering is working on. I do not have any date for any of those, but that is something that we would certainly like to have, to be able to kind of lock a device onto a specific AP. But I do not have that currently, but hopefully sometime in the future we will.
And Jeffrey, just let's dive into your install and find out exactly how we can help and get to maybe some more specific instances for yours. And
yeah, if we need to jump on the phone, you know, afterwards, happy to do that.
Great. Okay, here's a question from Bradley. I saved this one for last. I think it's a little detailed. I have a recent install giving me grief. Older 1950s house, lath and plaster, long ranch, about 130 feet long. Tried installing the XAP 1510, one at both ends, and the one in the middle on the controller. All wired, sorry.
Okay.
They are getting horrible speeds on wireless, 80 to 100 megabytes, but testing with a wire on the network getting 500 to 600. Could they be too close together or not hopping from one to the next? Would hardwire mesh with more nodes be the better solution?
Maybe, but I have yet to see a system where the active controller does a worse job than a mesh system does. The technology in the active controller is just really tough to beat. It's really good. There's a couple of possibilities there. Yes, the APs, I guess, could be too close together, but typically if that's the case, you'll see devices bouncing back and forth, and you can see that in the router logs, because there is an enormous amount of DHCP requests in the router log for the same device over and over and over. So if that's the case, you can either, you know, remove an AP, or you can turn the aggressiveness of the roam down a little bit or up a little bit, depending upon what you think is going to be best. So there's a few things that we can play with. But my recommendation would be, if you haven't already, maybe reach out to tech support. And if you have, again, same extension, if we need to jump on the phone afterwards and go over some things, we certainly can do that. But it typically shouldn't be, I mean, very rarely is it because you have too much coverage. Most of the time, I mean, if this, well, there's a couple other things too. I mean, are your SSIDs named the same or are they different? And when you're running your tests, do you know which frequency you're on if they're named the same? Because if it's 2.4 and you're getting, you know, 90 to 100 with lath and plaster walls, that's probably pretty darn good. But if it's 5 gig, that, you know, that's a little bit of a different story. But again, 5 gig, of course, the disadvantage is distance, and it has a much more difficult time going through the metal mesh of lath and plaster walls. So
Mhm.
your system may be defaulting over to 2.4 because it is a better signal, and the speeds are what they are, as you've seen. So yeah, if we need to jump on a call afterwards, certainly can do that. But there's a lot to go through and potentially unpack there.
Sure. Charlie's asking, is there a replacement for the coming for the 3150 router?
There is. There's a replacement wireless router and a replacement hardwired router and replacement AP. On the wireless side, all of them will at least be Wi-Fi 6, potentially 6E or 7.
Got it. Well, it's good to hear new products are coming. Obviously, what's your plans for Cedia, Jared? I mean, in lieu of
Well,
kind of
that
craziness in the
changed
next few weeks.
drastically at the beginning of this week.
Yeah.
We were planning on going, and just like Snap One,
Yeah.
Legrand has decided to postpone our attendance at the show. So unfortunately, I was going to be going, and I was really looking forward to being able to be out in front of people again. But unfortunately, it looks like that's going to have to wait until another year.
I know, Jared, we had a lunch date. What happened? That
We
is
did. I
not
know.
gonna
I was looking
you know.
forward to getting together with a bunch of people and having some sort of drink or something, but not in the cards apparently this year.
Well,
So
I'm here in Salt Lake, so I will buy you lunch if you want to come on down to our Volume Salt Lake
I
City.
guess we
You know
could,
what?
yeah.
Your afternoon is booked. I got you in 4 more hours, so you're not
It
going
is.
anywhere.
And I
Okay,
got
we are going to
several
do
things in
another session
between,
in 4
so.
hours. One more question coming in here from Kevin. Any issues with Mesh and Elan HR remotes? We have clients with Elan HR remotes and are using a Wi-Fi controller that drop off Wi-Fi every 20 to 30 minutes and then rejoin. They are set up with hidden SSID 2.4 only and no password. What's your take on that?
Again, I haven't seen any major issues with them, but I do know in the past some of the how can I say, more basic Wi-Fi card based remotes, whether they're URC, Elan, there have been some issues with those and connectivity. And really, it kind of comes down to more of what the remote and the Wi-Fi card and the remote decides to do. Because we've had multiple installations where Elan remotes have worked flawlessly with a wireless controller. So the Mesh, again, does not have an active wireless controller in it. It does have more of a fast roaming scenario. So it's 802.11r and K. So, I don't anticipate any issues. Like I said, we've got a couple of guys that have run Elan that haven't seen any issues or haven't reported them back.
Yeah.
But really, it depends more upon what the remote is doing than the network itself.
Kevin, I understand. And he's saying, hey, he was told a while ago there was known issues, that 20, 30-second pause. But let's just try to work together.
I can't say I know the newer Elan remotes that they released a year and a half or 2 years ago or so are much, much better than the original version was. They have a different Wi-Fi card in them, and they have seemed to be much more reliable than the original version did, as far as maintaining connectivity.
Pascal is asking, can you add SSIDs to specific nodes and not on others? Is that kind of the same question with going with specific DIY devices, or no?
No,
that was my take on that.
You can't do that. The Mesh does work out all as one system. So if you add an additional SSID, it will be across all the nodes in the entire system.
Dane, referring to that slow Wi-Fi issue, he had a case where Luxul 3150s had QoS settings that needed undoing.
There shouldn't be much QoS set up by default in the 3150. That I'd have to know more about that, because typically QoS isn't set up other than just for standard internet traffic. So yeah, that would be something I'd have to dive into a little bit more.
Thanks, Dane. All right, a couple guys just saying thank you and so forth. But great session. We're at 11:05. Jared, thanks for fielding all that. It's funny, regular connectivity issues, some product specific issues, a little bit looking into the future and stuff. Great discussion on Mesh. What's your take overall on this session?
Great questions.
Yeah.
Great feedback. We certainly appreciate them and keep them coming. That's what we're here for, is to all work together as a team and and make the end user that is ultimately all of our customer happy with the services that we're all providing. So yeah, no,
Yeah.
appreciate it. Love it.
Well, do you spend much time with the tech support as well, or is that still part of your area? So you kind of
Some,
see what's coming up on a session like today, and it kind of relates to what's going on in the last month or so, or?
yeah, I mean, we share feedback back and forth, and so they kind of keep me up to date on what are some issues that they keep getting phone calls on, or if there's particular topic, and then I take back to them questions like this that I get. So yeah, we do talk, and then I certainly I do spend a decent amount of time with training them on new products as they're coming
Well,
out
yeah,
and things like
it's not
that.
only
So.
the fix it issues. It's still what the great part of our gig is to invent new ways, and as the one customer who had the outdoor instance, and just try to dive into that, enhancing that system for that client, right?
Yep,
So,
exactly. Yep.
all right, so here's your numbers here. Yep.
Yeah.
Support.
So if there's anything that we can help you with, by all means, please reach out to us. Tech support, there is still a chat feature. It's now on Legrand AV. It's up in the top right corner, I believe. You can click on it, then you just select which brand do you want to get in touch with. You select Luxul, and it'll take you right to the same group of guys that it did previously on our when we had our own website. But same thing. So yeah, all that's available, and let us know how we can help you going forward.
Well, you still got 40, champions here on this call. Guys, I thank you so much. Great conversation again. Jared, it's always great to get with you. And, I like to try to do our personal side of this, is that's why we kind of hold these Wednesday webinars, for informal discussion, knowing that you're there in your home theater room right there, and I'm right here on site. We're here for you today. It's a rainy day, crazy day here in the in
Yep.
Utah, but let's get back to this in 4 hours. So if anybody on this call, you want to rejoin, please do. Let's get back to it a little bit later on today. If you can think of anything else, please do. We're here for you. I did record this session. Everybody's going to get an email from me on Friday morning, including Jared's slide deck. And that's it from the Salt Lake City store. Jared, why don't you do our final last words before we sign off?
Well, I just want to say thank you again for everybody for taking the time today. We certainly appreciate your business, and I always say this, but I mean it sincerely. You guys doing what you do allows me to do what I do, and I really do like what I do. So I appreciate all of that. Appreciate your time today, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.
Yeah,
Appreciate
from all
Gary
of
as
us.
well.
Yeah. Well, thank you, man. My job's easy. I mean, I just linking the two together. But no, extra special every single Wednesday. I've been doing a lot of trainings lately, and we're going to continue to do so. Next week, I've got Derek and my team at Snap One with Oversea, which we're looking forward to. Always a great class there. And from all of us at Snap One, you're talking AllNet and MRI and Custom Plus, and of course, Volutone, coming live from our brand new Salt Lake City location. Thank you guys so much. Be safe out there. I know it's busy. Let's continue the charge. Jared, I'll see you in a few hours. Bye,
Take
everybody.
care. Appreciate it. Thanks.